The little girl's question fell into the quiet park like a stone dropped into deep water, heavy enough to make the air tremble, and though it wasn't spoken loudly, it carried a weight that turned a man's chest tight from several steps away as he stood frozen with a paper grocery bag cutting into his palm. "Are we bad people, Mama?" she asked in a voice already tired of wondering, and in that instant, time slowed in a way that only happens when something breaks inside you and you know it will never fit back the same. The bench sat beneath thinning trees in a small-town park somewhere in Ohio, the kind of place where autumn always arrived early and lingered longer than it should. The woman on the bench wore exhaustion like a second coat, her shoulders bent inward as if she were trying to protect what little warmth she had left. Her name was Rachel, and she held her daughter, Anna, close even though the child was old enough not to need it, because some days holding on was the only proof that they still belonged to this world. The girl's hair was pulled back too tight, not for style but because mornings had become rushed and mirrors unnecessary. Their clothes were clean but worn, stretched thin the same way hope sometimes was when bills stacked higher than prayers. A few yards away stood Jacob, a single father who hadn't planned on stopping at the park that afternoon. He had only come because the grocery store felt too quiet after school drop-off, and silence had a way of reminding him of what he'd lost. His wife had been gone for 3 years, taken suddenly by a stroke that left no room for goodbyes or explanations, just a half-finished cup of coffee and a life that refused to slow down for grief. Since then, Jacob had learned how to braid hair badly, burn pancakes, and smile through the kind of loneliness that pressed on your ribs at night. He thought he had become used to pain, until he heard that question. If you were standing there, holding a bag of groceries and your own regrets, would you have walked away like everyone else did that day? Would you have told yourself it wasn't your place, that the world was already too heavy and you were carrying enough? Jacob asked himself that as his feet refused to move, as his mind replayed every moment he had once wished someone would have stepped in for him. He watched Rachel lower her head, watched her mouth move as she tried to find an answer gentle enough not to bruise a child's heart while honest enough not to lie. No one should have to answer that question, especially not a mother who had already lost so much. Rachel's life hadn't always looked like this. There had been a small house once, a husband named Mark who promised forever and meant it until addiction found him first, and evenings filled with laughter instead of eviction notices. When Mark left, the silence that followed was loud and unforgiving, and Rachel learned quickly how fast friends disappeared when you stopped being convenient. Jobs came and went, mostly went, and dignity slowly became something she rationed like gas in winter. Anna learned not to ask for things, learned how to read faces to know when money was gone, learned that being quiet sometimes kept the lights on longer. Jacob saw all of this without knowing the details, because hardship has a language that doesn't need words. He saw it in the way Rachel's hands trembled slightly, in the way Anna searched her mother's face for reassurance that never fully arrived. The grocery bag in his hand suddenly felt heavier, not because of the food inside but because of the choice forming in his chest. He thought about his son, Caleb, waiting at home with homework spread across the table, about the times Caleb had asked where his mom was and why heaven felt so far away. He remembered strangers who had brought casseroles in those first weeks, people whose names he never learned but whose kindness kept him standing. He took a step forward, then another, his heart pounding with the fear of doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. He didn't interrupt their moment, didn't speak right away, just stood close enough to be seen, close enough to be human. When Rachel finally noticed him, her eyes flashed with the instinctive defensiveness of someone used to being judged, but Jacob's expression held no pity, only recognition. He knelt slowly, setting the grocery bag down as if it were something sacred, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Jacob spoke gently, not to correct or rescue but to remind. He talked about how people end up in places they never planned to be, how being broken doesn't make anyone bad, how sometimes the strongest people are the ones who keep showing up even when life keeps knocking them down. He told Anna that good people still hurt, still lose, still sit on park benches wondering how everything slipped away. Rachel listened, tears forming despite her effort to stay composed, because it had been so long since anyone spoke to them like they mattered. That afternoon didn't fix everything. There were no miracles, no dramatic rescues, no sudden turn of fortune. But Jacob offered what he could, which turned out to be more than he realized. He shared information about a local church that ran a food pantry and after-school programs, about a community center that helped with job placement. He invited them to dinner, not as charity but as family, because loneliness feeds on isolation and shrinks when doors open. Rachel hesitated, pride wrestling with need, until Anna's small hand slipped into hers and squeezed, and something inside her softened enough to say yes. Weeks passed, then months, marked by small changes that added up slowly, quietly. Rachel found part-time work at a daycare, a place where patience mattered more than perfection. Anna started smiling again, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes and stays a while. Jacob became a regular presence, not as a savior but as a friend who understood that healing wasn't a straight line. They shared meals, laughter, and stories of loss that didn't hurt quite as much when spoken aloud. The park bench remained, but it no longer felt like a place of judgment, just another chapter. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in colors that felt like forgiveness, Anna ran ahead on the sidewalk, her laughter echoing back like a promise. Rachel walked beside Jacob, her posture lighter, her eyes clearer. She told him she still remembered that day, still remembered the moment everything could have gone differently if he had chosen to walk away. Jacob shrugged, uncomfortable with praise, and said he had only done what he hoped someone would do for his own child if he wasn't around to hear the question. Before the story ends, take a moment and tell us in the comments what you would have done if you were standing there that day, and whether you believe small kindnesses can truly change lives. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop, listen, and answer a question that was never meant to be asked. And if this story stirred something in your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, not out of habit, but because you believe the world still needs reminders that compassion can rewrite endings.